Hello, thank you for joining us on TechXchange. I'm Mianrong,
I'm Hilary.
and we'll be your host for today. So before we begin, I'm going to ask you a question. Why do you study science?
I was interested in it, I guess.
Interested in
Yep.
it? Were you good at it?
I would like to think so.
Okay, so now the question is, right, if let's say you were not interested in science, or let's say if you were not good at science, right, do you think you would have chosen science?
I'm not very sure about that actually.
Actually me too. I don't know. I was good at it, so that's why I went down this path. But
Right.
like you, I wouldn't be sure if I wasn't good at it. So today, we are very honored to have with us Dr. Jayshree Seth, corporate scientist and the first chief science advocate of 3M, who will be sharing with us her journey and how she got so far in science, even though, get this, she was not the science type. Okay, so hi Dr. Jayshree.
Hello,
I see you
very
online
nice
there.
to meet you.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for taking time to be with us. How are you?
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay. So, okay, we're going to the question side proper. So, as 3M's first chief science advocate, part of your work is helping people to see and appreciate science in their daily lives. So, I have to pose this to you. Have you always loved science?
Well, as a subject, when I was in school, I always liked science. But if you asked me whether it held the same appeal for a potential career compared to some of the other subjects, I would have to say no, because I didn't quite see how a career in STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math, could connect with any of my pro-social goals. I wanted to help people improve lives. And when you're young, you need someone to connect those dots for you, especially if you aren't the kid that like to play with tools or tinker with toys or tear apart their stuff. You may not see yourself in these fields. And I was more interested in the human context, so I like humanities related subjects. And I loved creative writing. So to answer your question, if I always loved science, I'll say I loved school. I loved working hard. I loved doing well, but I loved many more subjects than I loved science.
Okay.
Right, thanks for sharing that with
Yeah.
us. So how did you end up in the doing what you do? Did your parents have to do with any of the choices that you made entering STEM?
Well, interestingly, I grew up in a town that was steeped in science. It's one of the oldest engineering institutions in all of Asia. So I grew up on the campus of what is called IIT Roorkee now in India. It used to be University of Roorkee back then. And my dad was actually an engineering professor. So science was all around us. Everyone was a STEM professional, everyone's dads. And my parents had actually relocated the family there because they wanted us in this highly academic environment. And the idea was that both of us, my brother and I, would become engineers, and we wouldn't even have to leave home. So in many ways, the path was laid out for me and my brother and virtually all of our friends because of where we lived. So there was a strong encouragement to go into the hometown engineering school. So I would have to say that in a way, to answer your question, science chose me. But I have to say that we were always encouraged to pursue our interests also. I loved writing, so my mom always encouraged me to write. So that's how I ended up in science.
Whoa. So, but do you think it would have been like let's say if you had told your mother, I want to be a writer instead, would she have been like, oh, okay, sure, or she would have no writings on the side, you be a scientist first?
Exactly what you said. No, writing can be on the side. You can always write.
So when did you discover that you actually enjoyed science or you love, when do you discover that you actually love science?
It was simply whenever I understood and appreciated the context. So, for instance, I enjoyed biology all along because there was a very clear human context. But for engineering, and that's the field that I ended up, having to choose, unfortunately, that context is often missing. And very fast, it gets this content heavy. And then the relationship with the subject becomes somewhat transactional, somewhat like a chore that needs to be done. That relationship doesn't form. And for me, that lack of context really correlated with a lack of enjoyment. But when I got to graduate school, I was again faced with a project that I did not see relating to my pro-social goals. So I finally said I need to do something else. And I switched my fields from my master's to my PhD. That's when I ended up in a lab that was more collaborative. I realized that I needed that. An advisor that was more supportive. And I realized how important that was to me, and a project that I could build a context around. And with that, I was on fire. So you couldn't get me out of the lab. There was so much I wanted to do. I just threw myself into my work, and I truly enjoyed every moment of it. And I found out I loved what I did, and what I was doing was science. So it was the context that really inspired me and became a cornerstone of my career. And honestly, today, at the highest level at 3M, 72 patents, and I've been inducted into the 3M Hall of Fame. Every day I think about how many ideas, how many innovations, how many scientists, how many discoveries we're missing out on because of the way we teach, the way we train, the way we typify, the way we track, and the way we talk about STEM. And that has to change.
Right, that's so interesting. It's quite amazing that you switched fields so suddenly from your master's to your PhD.
Did you do both overseas or just the PhD overseas?
Both. So I went to the US for graduate school, both master's and PhD.
Oh, okay.
Oh, nice. So from graduate school, how did you end up joining 3M then? What's that story?
Yeah.
It's again serendipity. I came into 3M through the back door. So a fellow graduate student at Clarkson had accepted a position at 3M at the encouragement of his brother. And 3M was relatively unknown to us as graduate students on the East Coast of the United States. But my friend's brother had joined 3M after graduating from University of Minnesota. And many University of Minnesota students end up here because 3M is headquartered in Minnesota. So our friend encouraged graduate students at Clarkson to apply for summer internship at 3M. Now, these internships are typically for undergraduates because for graduate students, you leverage the summer months to advance work on the research projects under the guidance of their advisor. But two of us from our lab applied and ended up getting accepted. And fortunately, our advisor also saw it as a learning opportunity for his students, even if it was at the expense of advancing research. So he allowed us to come. And during that internship, I interviewed at another company as well as a group at 3M. And then I accepted the 3M opportunity. So I feel like I would have never found my way to Minnesota if it wasn't for this chain of events. So many things had to happen to make this happen. So in looking back, I truly feel like it was destiny. And I tell everybody, your destiny awaits. Oftentimes we don't know what we don't know. And we're planning every step and every move. And I ended up in US in a college that I knew nothing about. Then I ended up at 3M, a company I knew nothing about. And I just found out that it was the perfect place for me. Collaborative culture of empowerment, structural framing, the procedural systems, the cultural scaffolding, everything that had the vision of what I wanted to do. So it really fueled innovation for me.
Talking about serendipitous events, right? I think there's also a story behind how you end up in this particular college in the US, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't by choice, was it?
Well, it was quite typical for top students to pursue graduate school and do it in the US, and I hadn't really thought about it. And I knew that my parents were already talking about getting me married, so I wasn't clear how life would unfold. And
you had to escape that.
Yeah, there were 6 of us girls in the class, and we were about 35, I think, and none of the girls were applying. And I happened to be at the top of my class. So when I started getting a lot of questions from my classmates, I thought, what? My dad did his PhD in England. So in my family, it wasn't like people hadn't pursued graduate school abroad. So I guess it was in the back of my head. And I thought, what? I'll just apply. Why not? I'll probably not get in. We'll see. But I didn't know much about schools in the US, so I just picked based on application fee. And
Right.
Someone from a senior batch had gone to Clarkson. It was only $10. I said, okay, why not? And I got in. So you're absolutely right. It's funny how I tell my kids, you don't have to have everything planned out. I keep reminding them you have to focus on the journey and not so much on predetermined milestones. At the end of the day, it's more about attitude than aptitude. It's more about diligence than intelligence. And oftentimes it's more about skills over expertise. And I'm not sure whether they're listening. Maybe they are. They just don't want me to know, but I'm sure they're listening. But that's how life works out.
You'll be with 3M come like about 30 years this June,
29
right?
years, yeah, 29 years.
Oh, 29 years. And you have like an impressive 72 patents and counting to your name. And I think most of it is really skill, hard work and all that. So could you just share with us, right, what are some of the technologies that you help to develop that you are particularly proud of?
Well, I tell everyone it's not about the patents, it's about the problems we solve and the people that I worked with. And that is the most memorable part of these projects. Let's see, I worked on many different areas of sustainable innovations. Each one of them is special because we learned something different with each one. So I have patents on diapers, face wipes, packaging materials, energy conservation materials, nanomaterials, nonwovens, elastics, hook and loop, adhesives, tapes, so things like that.
Wow. That's quite a long list, actually.
A long list of innovations.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned sustainability just now, right?
Yeah.
I think we have a question on that.
Yeah. So with the issue of global warming nowadays, I think sustainability is a big question in everybody's mind. Is there any particular products or technologies that yourself or 3M has developed over the years to support the sustainable Earth?
Well, it's interesting. From the very first project at 3M, 29 years ago, everything that I have worked on has had a strong sustainability value proposition. So my very first project was on eliminating solvents. Then it was for reducing raw material content. Then I worked on introducing sustainable materials, more energy efficient processes. I worked on transitioning old product platforms to more sustainable options as more and more technology advances became available. So we've been doing sustainability at 3M well before it became a buzzword. And our sustainability framework is strategic in that it works towards science for circular, science for climate, and science for community. So we want to create a positive world with science, and we want people to join us at 3M.
How about like the way research is done? You know, over the years, like maybe this like almost 30 years that you've been there, have the processes like changed with like time and all that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we have our corporate labs that continually develop technology building blocks that allow us to add to our periodic table of technology, which is 51 of them right now. And we mix and match all of these to get to the best possible, most sustainable solution for our customer. So whether it's in the choice of raw materials, whether it is in the choice of processes, whether it's in the choice of what the end user ends up doing with it, what the customer ends up doing with it, and how it can be more energy efficient. So whether it's things from window films to things like Scotch-Brite, across the board, we have a sustainability value proposition in all our new products.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. Yeah,
a lot of collaboration across everybody to make sure that you guys are finding the best solutions in the most sustainable way.
Yeah. So I think at this point, it would be good for us to take a little break at this juncture and play a game. So this section is actually called the bowl section.
Yeah.
and it's kind of a little characteristic that we have here in our TechXchange podcast.
Yeah. Okay. So in this bowl segment, right? You'll be explaining a technology of our choice to an audience, right? That we'll pick from this bowl. So this bowl was this beautiful bowl was made by our lead producer Cassie. Yeah, and I promise we didn't rig the results. It's very fair. You can see a lot of papers inside. All the different personas. Okay.
So if we are ready to start, Dr. Jayshree, just now you did mention quite a long list of different innovations and products that yourself and 3M have produced. So maybe you'd like to pick a particular technology to talk about, and then Myeong will pick the persona.
Yeah. So which technology would you like to share with our audience today?
I can talk about the work I did on diaper tape.
Sure,
yes.
sure.
That's actually of interest to me because I have 2 young kids, right, who use diapers like every day.
Perfect.
Yeah, and then I'm very interested to know how diapers have changed. Okay.
All right.
So what is it in particular about diapers? Is it like the adhesive part, the so-called the locking system?
Yes.
Okay. So let's do it. Okay. So I'm gonna pick.
For you.
Okay.
All right, so Dr. Jayshree, we've picked a police officer.
Oh, wow. All right. So I'm going to describe to the police officer that one of my patents is about, instead of having a rectangular closure, have a circular closure so that the rectangle doesn't poke into the baby. And everybody knows that babies have nice bellies, and if it's a very sharp corner, that can actually dig into their belly. So what I did is, and I didn't have kids at that time, but I would just stare at this thing and think, wow, this might really hurt the baby, but the baby can't be interviewed and they can't answer questions. So I would imagine what it would be like for the baby to wear that. And I just thought it would be so nice if we would have circular instead of the rectangle. And many people had talked about it. So I came up with a clever idea on how to make it rounded so that it doesn't dig into the belly. Whether the child grows up to be a policeman or not, but we want to make sure that they have nothing poking them.
Oh, well, that's really interesting.
Nice. Yeah.
So, what did it change the type of locking mechanism that was used?
It can be done in any, it was just a way to not waste any material. Because as you can imagine, if you cut rectangles, you don't waste anything. When you start cutting circular, you will start wasting. So this was a tessellated pattern, it's called, so that there is no waste involved.
Oh, that's so interesting. Like to know that innovation goes. It plays a part in every small thing in our lives.
Yeah, and actually
Absolutely.
observation as well.
Yeah.
I always encourage people to think about practical solutions to problems and apply for patents so that they can get into this habit of holding yourselves accountable for innovating.
Yes, very interesting.
Yeah,
You really embody the human touch, the human connection, in your work. Yeah, even with science and everything.
Absolutely.
anyway, I
I hope
think,
the policeman agrees.
Yeah, definitely. I'm pretty sure he has kids as well.
Anyway, thank you for being so game with playing our bowl segment. So I think now we'll continue with our discussion. I think we've talked quite a bit about you being 3M's first ever chief science advocate. Would you like to share with us more about that? What does being a chief science advocate mean to you?
We at 3M, we care about science, and we do this survey. And the results have been quite astounding. It was clear that science needs advocates, science needs more champions, and it was clear that this was not some data we can keep close to our vest at 3M. This needs to be shared, and we need to foster a global conversation around this topic. And we have been doing this survey since 2018 now. But in 2017, we did the first survey. 2018, the results came out, and I was called to be the company's first ever chief science advocate. And to be honest, when I got the call, I was like, what now? What is this role? Because if you Google it, you see that this role doesn't exist anywhere. And my first reaction was, I can't do this. And, as I discussed, when I was growing up, I never thought of myself as the science and engineering type. I was strongly encouraged by my parents to go into the field. I had my share of struggles through graduate school. I came into 3M through the back door. And so I was kind of like, am I the right person for this? But then it kind of started falling together for me, my own journey, and also my experiences in raising my kids. I have a son and a daughter, and I noticed the differences between how my son was okay with the content, but for my daughter, the context was so important. So I took this role on because I realized that's a message I can bring, and I'm glad I did because it's very important to make sure there's a positive perception of science, not just in the public, but also for the next generation, for them to aspire to go into science. So we have to work on that perception. So I'm glad I took that role.
Yeah, I can see that you strongly believe that you are not the science type because I see the words "not the science type" behind you. So
that's actually a poster. That's a poster from a docuseries that 3M created,
Right.
and it was actually in response to results of the survey in 2020
Right.
that told us that we want to encourage more girls and women in science.
Yeah, would it be the State of Science survey? That's the one that you're talking about, right? Yeah. So I'm
Right,
just curious,
right.
from the survey results, right? Was there anything that was so astonishing or so shocking to you that you guys felt like, whoa, we need to advocate for science?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of it. I mean, right off the bat, the first thing that just shocked the heck out of me was, so many people, almost 4 out of 10 saying if science didn't exist, their lives would be no different. This was a global, the first time we did it, 14 countries, and it was astounding. And what were they doing the survey on? Their laptops and mobile phones. So it was very clear that science is invisible, science is underappreciated, and science is taken for granted. That's the problem. And it was interesting that They wanted their kids to learn more. They even wanted their kids to pursue career in science, which was very interesting. I don't care, but you kids, you go do science. That doesn't work. Some of the other things people said is, I was more excited about science as a child. Other people said, as an adult, I don't know why I need to understand science. 36% of those surveyed said, well, you have to be a genius to have a career in science. So all those labels like genius, they actually deter underrepresented minorities. They deter women, and women trailed men in the positive sentiment for science. For example, when it was asked the question, can you have a satisfying career in engineering? 25% of the men agreed, but for women, it was only 9%. So we know that we have a lot of work ahead of us, which really needed advocating when the results started coming.
Right, and these results are, they're in settings where education is advanced. Like for example, in universities, both men and women are equally educated. Women still felt that they may not have such a fulfilling career in science.
It was a demographic representation of the country. So the 1,000 respondents per country was chosen as a reflection of the demographic. So it was essentially would be what is the current representation. But it's interesting to see that women trail in all questions on the positive sentiment for science.
So what are some of the things that, as chief science advocate, what is it that you help to do to raise awareness for science?
Yeah, so when I got the role, I realized that you've got to keep it simple. So as an engineer, I broke it down into 3 parts. A is about raising awareness and appreciation and acknowledgement of science so we can move people from the sort of apathy that they were feeling. Second area, or B, I call, is for breaking down biases, boundaries, barriers, beliefs. Things like, oh, I'm not a genius, I can't do science, or I'm a girl, science is not for me. All these are issues. And we see that, the portrayal of science in media, despite having 2 PhD scientists at home, my daughter says, oh, I don't want to do science. That's for geeks. So that image of nerds and loners and mavericks and evil and genius and male scientists in media, that isn't going to inspire little girls. So that needs to be addressed, and it's happening slowly. And finally, we have to focus on context and champion and communicate that scientists solve problems and science can improve lives. And I know from my own experience how important context was to me. I know from my experience with my daughter. And I know for my son, content was sufficient. So with girls, we need to put a different lens for communicating about STEM education and career. So I take this message with me as I travel the world. I guess I travel the world from my home now, but I would love to visit Singapore in person someday.
We'd love to have you here.
And I interact with students, and I interact with educators, interact with community advocates, present at conferences, and I also write a lot about these topics.
Well, that's really a very efficient and technical way to break down, what you need to do to raise awareness. I mean, such a difficult problem, but you managed to, shape it down so nicely.
Yeah, and I think you've mentioned it quite a bit. Being a woman of STEM yourself, you seem to be very strongly supportive of women being in STEM. So what would you like to wish to see for women, in the next generation in this field, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, just these numbers are so stark. The population of the world is estimated to be 9 billion, right? In just a few decades. So we have so many challenges that we need to solve for if we're going to unlock the secrets to a sustainable future. And so we need all the creativity and the curiosity and the diversity that we can get. So science cannot be limited to some monolithic group. Whichever way you look at it, you need all the ideas we can get, and it is good for all of us. So I'm all about diversity in science because that makes science stronger. It makes the appeal of science stronger. It makes the adoption of science-based solutions stronger. So yeah, I'm a big advocate for diversity in STEM for women and anybody who is underrepresented. And there has never been a better time to talk about these topics as right now, as we're slowly emerging from a very interesting 2 years, right? Virtually all of humanity facing the same crisis, confronting the same fears, and awaiting our turn for the same gift of science and the vaccine. So in this strange time that we have living through, we have seen very clearly that science and scientists and professionals in STEM have a profound impact in shaping our future. And if that is the case, we want equal representation. We want society's representation in science. And the global public is recognizing that as well. So it is important to advocate for science and adequate representation. That's just the way I feel.
Right. Yeah, we understand that you have a book, right, as well as a scholarship to fund women in science. Is that right?
That's true. That's true. I've always liked writing, and I was writing about my perspective on things. And then I became chief science advocate, and I started writing about science advocacy and my experiences. And 2020 was just a tough year. It wasn't just the pandemic. There was a lot of social justice issues. There was a reawakening from all different aspects because of what transpired, And so I wanted to do something. So I compiled all my essays together. And those essays got published by Society of Women Engineers. I keep it close by in my book, The Heart of Science, Engineering Footprints, Fingerprints, and Imprints. So it's basically a collection of essays on big picture topics, from my experiences as an engineer, a parent, a science advocate, a thought leader. And I talk about STEM advocacy. I talk about convergence of STEM and humanities. I talk about, leading from our own rung of the ladder and developing a growth context. And so, it was very interesting. I should mention that almost exactly a year after the launch of this one, I got to meet the first scholar who was funded from the sales of my book.
Wow.
Well, that's
it
great.
was a phenomenal experience. This poor kid was probably thinking, who's this crazy lady? Because I was so emotional. And I just thought, wow, this is incredible. And, one book, one scholarship, one student, it all starts with the power of one. And I just got this thought that I need to write book 2. And I just threw myself in this. So I am excited to tell you that my book 2 is coming out, and that is Engineering Fine Print. And that's where I go deeper into the topic of transitions to thrive and survive amidst change, reflections to provide perspective, and then insights into actions we can take as we all transition towards this next normal to become better versions of who we are. So I really think it'll help people, and specifically women, sort of navigate through STEM and through life.
Yeah, I think this is a start of creating a movement, to push for more women in STEM and everything.
Yeah, and I think it's great to see your efforts directly translated into providing an education for someone else.
Yeah. So I guess, when people view your portfolio, right, I'm pretty sure they make some assumptions, about who you are. Like, Dr. Jayshree must have excelled in science, that's why she's here today and all that. But your story is really atypical and certainly very refreshing. And I think it really brings hope to everybody who is listening to you, who is listening to you tell a story, because it is not just about you don't have to have an aptitude to do this. You don't have to be talented in this, as long as you try hard enough and you work hard enough, right, you can get where you want to be, right? And then is this the message that you want to share with people, the young minds of today?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's all about just working hard. It's about truly bringing your talent. So the fact that I had a very humanities-oriented mindset, bringing that into STEM is what gave me context, which fueled my innovation. So, you always have to work hard if you want to succeed, whether it is to be a famous podcaster or a good policeman or whatever it is. It requires working hard. But really bringing your talents and really using them is what is critical. And we have clearly seen in the last 2 years that there is an urgent need for a broader perspective and social context for science. So my dream is really of a more diverse science community and science as a more inclusive space. Our world requires innovation. Innovation needs science. Science demands diversity, and diversity warrants equity. We need science. We need more people in science. We need more people to be science-minded, and we need more people who can communicate the social benefits of science. So that's my dream, so that we can foster trust and instill hope.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums it up really nicely.
That sums it up very nicely.
Yeah.
And I think with that, we've come to the end of our conversation with Dr. Jayshree. We would like to thank you very much for your honest and engaging sharing with us. And
Yes.
I think you're truly an inspiration to us all.
Definitely.
Yeah, Meryl and I have enjoyed chatting with you very much. And to our audience, once again, thank you for joining us on this Tech Exchange episode. And we will see you again. Bye-bye. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us on this episode of Tech Exchange. I hope you enjoyed yourself as much as we did. And please remember to follow all our socials here, and please remember to click like and subscribe. Bye!